I wish they'd invent something to do this or that. And then all the lights go on inside my head. That's me, with a bottom second for Manchester. And there it is, flamethrower experiments. Would you like to stand in the middle of the street and take a picture of a flamethrower coming at you? Life should be fun, shouldn't it?
Through your career, you've invented some amazing machines.
Among the many varied, weird jobs I had was assisting biologists to freeze hamsters and bring them back to life. I thought they'd do it, use high-tech physical methods of freezing and warming so that the animal had the best chance. I had a friend in the Navy on that strange laboratory at the top of the hill above Portsmouth. And I said, is there any chance I could borrow a continuous wave magnetron from you and do some microwave experiment? He said, oh yes, it's a secret, but you can borrow it. The simple device that I used was a bit box-like, and there was a timer. There were all the essential parts of a microwave oven, and we'd put these hamsters in it and turn the switch and wait to see what happened. I'd put a lunch in on several occasions. If you were radiated frozen, and when I say frozen, they were so hard, they were like that wood with 10-centimetre microwaves. It wasn't long before it was scurrying around. I think I had the first microwave oven ever. I never patented it.
So this is the electron capture detector.
That's right. It was then the most sensitive detection device in the world. It operates by regarding an electron in its wave configuration, not as a particle, detected at incredibly low levels. If you had a certain perfluorocarbon, you could spilt it on the floor here from a pint bottle. You could pick it up in Japan a week later.
Wow.
The head of spaceflight operations for NASA, a guy called Abe Silverstein, wrote to me and said, would I come and work with him? What they badly needed was a little gadget that would go on their tiny rockets, would send a signal that could be sent all the way to Earth quite easily, and could detect the kind of things they wanted to look for. And it happens that this fits almost all of those things.
And that was at the JPL, is that right?
Yes. When I was invited, I went.
And that's where you had your work of the ideas about Gaia started.
That's right. What happened was that I read a book by that famous physicist, Erwin Schrödinger, called What is Life? Well, that was, what more could one want if you were looking for life on Mars? The biologists wouldn't read it. I mean, they didn't like quantum theory or anything like that. And but I read it, and when the main thing that Schrödinger said was the most characteristic quality of life is its tendency to reduce the entropy of the system around it. So I wandered to a meeting where a lot of biologists were arguing about the different methods of finding life, and they were mostly sending little bits of gear into the Mojave Desert and seeing if they could find life there. Well, they could, but it was Earth-type life, and it didn't really mean a damn thing. I started arguing with them. They got very cross, and finally one of them, the senior one, called the management, and I got called to see a guy called McGreblian, Robert McGreblian. He was a senior rocket engineer, and he said, why are you upsetting all our biologists? How would you detect life on Mars? I said, I'd look for an entropy reduction. And he laughed and said, well, he said, yeah, that's an easy one to say. You've seen that book. He said, well, this is the kind of thing a student would say. It's unless you give me a practical experiment that we could send to Mars that would look for life and find it, I'm not interested. You have until Friday. This was Tuesday. I was a bit worried on Thursday night, and it came to me quite suddenly. It's dead easy. All you have to do is analyze the atmosphere of Mars, and if it's made of gases that react with one another chemically and produce heat or different substances, then its entropy is lower than that of a simple neutral gas mixture. If you do it to the Earth's atmosphere, you find there's methane and oxygen in the air, and these react together, give heat and different substances, and you could draw the conclusion there must be life on Earth. Microbian was delighted, so was NASA. They thought this was a great idea, and would be the basis for the experiment that later got called Viking, that was sent to Mars in the 70s. There was another key magical invention, which was this. The metal is an alloy of palladium and silver. If you pass the currents through this, you can easily heat it to about 200. When it reaches 200, hydrogen gas will go through the walls as if they didn't exist. You could take some surface of Mars, heat it up, put it through the GCMS or through a gas chromatograph, and then feed it into this pipe. And the hydrogen would entirely vanish, leaving only the things you wanted to know. When I look out at the sky at night and see Mars, I know the two bits of my hardware on the planet that worked.
Not many people can say that.
Not many. But that in a way was why I got interested in Gaia, because chemistry and life were clearly very closely connected.
And you write about how intuition is really important.
We don't know how our brains work very well. One of the greatest handicaps that humans suffered was speech. Speech is linear, it's cause and effect. This sounds logical and reasonable, but it's not very good in true logic, because the real universe, or cosmos, a better word, doesn't run like that at all. I made a little model called Daisy World, an absolutely solid model. You can't explain it by cause and effect. It explains Gaia in many ways.
Do you think that's what annoyed so many scientists about the theory when you first started talking about it?
Yes, I think they're not used to thinking outside that box.
It's hard to sort of think of an analogy, but if you rely on intuition, don't you get into the trap of things like homeopathy and people who today are talking about not taking vaccines? They would argue that they're relying on intuition.
You're completely right, and I agree with you. But, you see, Gaia wasn't like that. Intuition may have brought the idea into my mind, but the models like Daisy World and their follow-up, it was about 70 different species regulating a huge pile of different things. Really complicated.
Your new book, Novacene, you talk about the Anthropocene is over and the Novacene has begun. And it's the idea that artificial intelligences and cyborgs, the connection of chemistry and electronic.
And anything else. It was really kicked off by AlphaGo, the application of mathematical modelling in a much more constructive way than had been done previously.
What's so important about AlphaGo and it winning those matches? Why is that the moment that it started?
Is not a logical cause and effect thing. The program is in a sense choosing its own bits and pieces. If that is not the start of life, I'd like to know what is. And I see Mr. Darwin hovering in the background there, thinking, right, yeah, now that's going to evolve.
You're very optimistic about this new form of life.
Yeah.
Why are you optimistic when people like Elon Musk
Well,
are?
the optimistic version is more efficient.
So you talk about this idea that they'll want to, the hyper intelligent beings will want to keep us around like we keep gardens and pets.
And we keep plants. Well, there are 5 kingdoms, aren't there? The Nova scene will be the new kingdom.
So it's a new kingdom of life.
Yes.
You've lived through the first era of artificial intelligence. In the 70s, everyone got very excited about it.
We had, when we lived in America for a short while, a Roomba vacuum cleaner. And it's quite fascinating. It would run around the floor, sweep it all up, and when its batteries got low, it'd go and find a charging socket. But it was the artificial intelligence of those times.
And today's different.
Oh, sure is. The difference being that the artificial intelligence today can think for itself.
Do you think humanity will get to the point where we actually create these beings, and will we survive long enough?
No, we won't create them. They'll create themselves.
Right. We won't destroy ourselves before then?
I don't. Well, we don't have long anyway. I agree with Martin Rees. You know, he wrote that book, Our Final Century. I think it was a good cause for regarding this as our final century. The appearance of these Novacine things gives us a chance to get out of it.
And you, on balance, think that will happen? You think they've got enough
I hope
time?
so.
Right.
I mean, it won't affect me. I'll be dead by then. But it will certainly affect my children.
And you don't have any faith in the ideas of finding life on Mars, or, you know, having a
I
backup?
think that's absolute rubbish. I mean, I know a fair amount about Mars.
You don't think we'll move there and start colonies on the Moon and Mars?
No, I do not. I mean, it'd be easier to start colonies on Antarctica. Enormously easier than on Mars. I mean, I cannot think of a much more inhospitable place. I mean, I think Elon Musk is a very clever man. He must be. He wouldn't be so rich. But to want to go and live on Mars is just about as crazy as you could be. He must hate people even more than I do.
You said it would be better for him to crash on impact.
That's right, yes.
One of the things I wrote about was moonrise recently, and the idea, the picturing of Earth from afar. How important are perspectives for understanding climate change and changing our behaviour?
I can see that it is very helpful to a meteorologist to be able to look at the Earth from outside.
It's more the idea that astronauts, when they come back and they've seen the Earth, they see how fragile the atmosphere is.
Yes.
And surely part of...
Why fragile?
Because it's so thin.
Tough as old boots.
But it looks,
I mean,
it looks thin.
Billions of years. It can't be very fragile. No. And you see, there's a word that slips in until it becomes a truth that isn't a truth. And they just don't understand it. They like the look of it. It looks good. It's like the view outside here. It's beautiful. Sandy and I travelled on a helicopter at Cape Canaveral with Lovell, and he told us about his experience on Apollo 13, you know, the one that had an explosion of the oxygen generator. And they had sheer misery. I didn't realise that most of the journey for him and his fellow crewmen was that the cabin was minus 30. There was no heating at all. It was just the temperature of space. He said it was absolute hell. Now, it was the most moving story. I doubt whether he felt very strongly about the sight of the Earth coming in from space.